The tail side of the coin is Trump meeting with Putin, who is an actual authoritarian, and getting his clock cleaned / just looking like a fucking idiot. It is unbelievable. It is shameful. It is embarrassing. It is all of those things. And then, of course, the long and the short of it is that Trump accomplished nothing.
Yeah.
Less than nothing.
I mean, it could have been worse.
Yes.
I was actually quite concerned that he was going to not only give away, like, basically all of Ukraine, but, like, Alaska was going to be part of the negotiation. You know?
Yeah, I mean, anything's on the table with that guy.
Welcome to Seriously, the podcast that dives into the baffling.
We can't send them to a prison where there's animals, where there's livestock.
The ridiculous.
Like omelets better than sex.
And downright unbelievable political climate in red states like Louisiana.
So we can't go there. There are no vegan jails.
Seriously.
Welcome to Seriously. We're your host. I'm Michelle.
And I'm Ellie.
Today, we're going to do part 2 of our SCROTUS review.
Yes.
We have 2 more cases that we're going to discuss, Skrmetti and then Trump v. CASA.
Which, full disclosure, we actually discussed them last week in one marathon session.
That's right. That's right.
That was so long, and by the end, I at least was so tired and half drunk, but so hopefully
it's good, but yeah.
We had to break it in 2 though. That's the long and the short of it.
That's
I think
right.
That was a smart decision.
I think so too. But that is why for our YouTube viewers, we are wearing different things. We didn't do like a costume change.
No, but I think we should consider that.
Really?
Just costume changes, yeah. Not really. It's hard for me to figure out something to wear even once.
I know. Oh my gosh. I know. And you always look so nice. I'm just like, whatever I can not sweat in, basically, is kind of where I'm at right now. Yeah. But, I mean, we have like 2 more months of summer?
Yeah.
Fucking
2.5 till Halloween, basically.
I hate summer. I hate it.
Living in the wrong place, Michelle.
Tell me about it.
Summer.
For so many reasons.
Correct.
So many reasons. All right. Well, we're going to do our Seriously moments. Do you want to go first? Do you have one for this week?
Sure. Mine is in 2 parts, and it's actually about authoritarianism, which you and I were just talking about, as we do, but it's unrelated to what I'm about to say. But this is about our wannabe authoritarian president, of course, and sort of 2 halves of the coin on that this past week. So the first thing being, of course, that Trump has taken over DC.
Oh, yeah.
Taken over the city, putting FBI agents on the ground, the National Guard on the ground, and at least for a brief time, I think yesterday, before a court told him to back the fuck off of this part at least, had fully taken over the police department, put their own people in charge of the police department.
Yeah.
So that's insane and outrageous. My friends in DC are freaking out and pissed off about it. Obviously the rules in DC make it a little bit different than in other cities, although of course, Trump did something similar to this in LA already.
Yeah.
But, because DC is not its own state, because of the home rule issues, which of course is supposed to mean that they can govern themselves.
Right.
But there's some ability for the federal government to
But it's
do
when
this.
it's an emergency situation.
Yes. And this emergency was that one of the Doge bags got carjacked. That's the impetus of it.
Which is not good.
No.
But also not calls for
yes.
completely unleashing
according
the
to
federal government.
Yes, according to everyone, then the crime rates in DC are way down. They're down by 30% from last year. So there's no justification for it. And he's taking a maximal approach to doing it. Which is just incredibly authoritarian. The capital of our city now has troops and federal agents on the ground, like stopping people. Like they're stopping cars and like inspecting people and whatever. And of course that Trump, like, because he's Trump, like he immediately said that like he wants to do this other places where of course there would be no legal justification at all.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to note that the only cities so far where this has happened, there are Black lady Democrats who are the mayors. And the only cities that he singled out in his like screed are other cities. They're not all women, but they're all Black Democrat mayors. And we currently have a Black female Democrat mayor in New Orleans, and the crime is always an issue here.
Yes.
So, New Orleans might be on the list. And I assume that our dear governor would welcome it, would welcome them.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Putting federal troops or federal agents, whatever, on the ground here. I mean, they themselves, the state is constantly trying to take over law enforcement in New Orleans. So that's a interesting and bad development on the authoritarian front.
Well, but they're also like not even deploying these officers anywhere where crime is actually the problem in DC. They've got them just like out on the mall with like tourists and.
Oh, that's what I mean. I heard the same thing yesterday that like they're in like when they're stopping people and inspecting people and whatever, like that's like in like, just like the main commerce areas of DC. Right. So, I mean, there's a pretext for this, and whether it would ever be successful is like very much up for debate. But, it's just more of Trump pushing the envelope on like, well, what can I do?
Yeah.
What will the American people stand? Like, how far can I push this? So that's the heads side of the coin on Trump being authoritarian. The tails side of the coin is Trump meeting with Putin, who's an actual authoritarian, and getting his clock cleaned / just looking like a fucking idiot.
Oh my
God.
God.
I mean, it is unbelievable. It is shameful. It is embarrassing. It is all of those things. So essentially, I'm sure folks have the basics of this, but like Trump invited Putin to the United States, to Alaska, for a summit about the Ukraine war, that he was going to end on day one. Way after day one at this point, but Putin is a war criminal. Like he's not allowed to travel to places like the United States.
Well, I mean, he can travel to the United States, but
get arrested then.
They couldn't meet anywhere else because he would, the International Criminal Court would have arrested him if he had gone basically anywhere else.
Yeah, which I mean, they could and should have done that in the United States. Like if he's outside of Russia in a law and order country, he should be arrested.
Yeah.
But nah, instead of that, we're inviting him to Alaska, and then literally rolling out a red carpet. It was like, dear leader, like, our troops all bowing down to him on a red carpet. He's driving around with the president in like the president's limo and the beast. I mean, like, just like you would with like your best friend. If your best friend was coming to visit and you happen to be the president. So all of that optically is like horrible for the United States, but really good for Putin. And then of course, the long and the short of it is that Trump accomplished nothing. Yeah. Less than nothing. They give like some press conference at the end that Putin leads. Putin's in charge of it. He's the one who talks first. He's the one who like gives some like historical lesson of, Ukraine and Russia that is like demonstrably false, while Trump stands there and does nothing. And while he had been, in the lead up, like sounding a little bit better on Ukraine, like everyone was worried that Trump was just going to give away the whole goddamn store.
Yeah.
Like, give away the store. Zelensky's not even there, whatever. Yeah. So he didn't do that. I think partially because I was amused. So Zelensky and the Europeans, they had like their own emergency summit like a day or two before, where they like zoomed in Trump at some point. I think that was unplanned. I may be wrong about that, but to me it was like a million meetings that like I have been in, that lots of people have been in, like where it's like as a lawyer, but like some sort of crisis management thing where you're like, okay, let's just get this person on the phone. Yeah. Let's just fucking get them on the phone. So they were like, let's just get Trump on the phone.
Be like,
We got to tell him.
you cannot do this.
Yes.
Yes.
This guy is a former KGB agent. Like, he is a master manipulator. Like, don't listen to him and don't promise anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess Trump didn't do that, but we don't really know because, like, the readout of it was basically that we don't have a deal, including a ceasefire. But, you know, I think Trump said, we're not there yet. You don't have a deal until you have a deal. So that's it.
That's
this
it.
summit, he got worked by Putin.
Mm-hmm.
I think probably just like Putin just like kind of, you know, went on and on and on about all the fake historical record. Trump got bored. Trump got confused. Trump doesn't really care. Marco Rubio couldn't keep him on track because it also ended real fast. It was like hours and hours shorter than it was supposed to be. Like when I got in my car yesterday, leaving the office at like, I don't know, 6:30 or something, then it was like the end of the press coverage where they were laughing on NPR, like being like, well, we thought that we were supposed to start coverage of this now, but instead we're ending it because they canceled lunch, didn't do a real press conference, just like came out after a couple hours and were like, hi, it was a great meeting. There is nothing to report.
Yeah.
It's so in other words, again, that's the tail side of the coin on authoritarianism, which is Trump is actually bad at it. Like when he's actually put in a position where like he has to come up against like someone who's
An
good
actual
at this,
authoritarian?
yeah, then like he can't do it. He's like bored, he's tired, he's a moron.
I mean, it could have been worse.
Yes.
I was actually quite concerned that he was going to not only give away like basically all of Ukraine, but like Alaska was going to be part of the negotiation. You know?
Yeah, I mean, anything's on the table with that guy. I lived in Eastern Europe. I lived in a former Soviet republic for 3 years with my ex-husband. I lived in Latvia. So, like, I'm very, very aware of what Putin is like and what the historical record really is about the Russian occupation of places like Ukraine and why the Ukrainians absolutely cannot just, like, stop fighting.
Yeah.
Because, like, Russification was an actual policy with all of those places, like in Latvia and all the Baltics and in Ukraine. You couldn't speak the indigenous language, like the history of your actual country couldn't be taught in schools. They moved Russians into all those territories to try to kill the culture.
Yeah.
And of course, they're real pissed at the Ukrainians right now. I mean, it will be brutal. It will not just be that. I mean, they're already raping people all the time. They're stealing children.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no world in which like the Ukrainian population can literally can survive a Russian takeover that like is actually officially happening.
Yeah.
In the KGB then, even as it was being dismantled, as the Soviet Union was being dismantled, then they all took an oath that they would work to reinstate the Soviet Union. That is their guiding principle. That is Putin's guiding principle. So yeah, he wants all of Ukraine. He wants all the countries back, particularly the ones that like the Baltics, that were actually, and Georgia, that were actually a part of the Soviet Union. In the Moscow airport, then in Skrmetti, then Riga, which is the capital of Latvia, it is still in their domestic terminal. If you're in Moscow and you want to fly to Riga, which people come there all the time, it's a beautiful city, but you don't go to the international terminal. It's in their domestic terminal. Like the Russian population itself still believes those countries to be theirs.
Wow.
Yeah. So there's a lot at stake. So yes, it could have been worse, but Trump also doesn't understand or care about all of this. Like how many people are dying, what Putin's real motivation is here, and that like what he did yesterday just like legitimizes Putin and doesn't in any way disincentivize invading a foreign country.
Yeah.
What's yours seriously from this past week? As all weeks, then there's like endless things to choose from. So
It's true, but I'm going to talk about something that went around on a group chat with us, and this was maybe a couple weeks ago, but we haven't talked about it, so I'm going to bring it up. The U.S. is destroying $9.7 million worth of contraceptives. So they've been stockpiled in Europe
Yep.
for distribution through USAID. But USAID is no more. So we just have, almost $10 million worth of contraception sitting in warehouses. And the U.S. is going to spend like almost $200,000 to literally just incinerate
That's
them
right.
rather than donate them to, other
Any other
nonprofits
or
or countries. Yeah.
It's like a corollary to them destroying food
Yeah.
in warehouses for the same reason, because like we don't do that anymore. We don't do USAID, but it's even more with the food. We let it rot, like we let it expire. It's things that like it takes a long time to perish. It's not like fruits and vegetables. But the birth control, by all accounts, is not expired.
It's not.
Like it's just like it's perfectly good birth control, perfectly good, and like a bunch of other countries and or nonprofits have offered to take it off the U.S.'s hands. Like, we'll take it from you. We'll take it. Like, don't worry about it. And
They're
at
like,
least
no.
so far, the government is like, no, we're going to burn it.
No, this is like, okay, we're cutting waste, fraud, and
Yeah,
abuse.
that's
Like,
right.
this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
This is the most wasteful thing in the world.
Yeah, it'll cost a bunch of fucking money to burn it. Also, I don't know if you saw in the article, but this makes sense. Like, there's only a few facilities like in the world that can safely incinerate like stuff like this, like birth control. Like one is in France. Like, so there's like, it'll have to be done in stages, and it has to be done like very carefully because it releases all kinds of hormones into the air. So like, it's actually a kind of a hard project. Like it's expensive and logistically difficult to burn this shit. That's what we're gonna do.
Yeah.
As opposed to, doing anything else with like a useful product. And I don't remember from the article, maybe you do, like there's really good numbers on like it's like 10,000.
I'll tell you.
Okay. Yes,
I got it.
The number of people this could help.
All right.
Go
So NPR reported that these could have provided pregnancy prevention for more than 650,000 people for like up to a year. So that would be like your NuvaRings and your pills, but long-acting birth control, which can provide,
So like IUDs.
Yeah, like IUDs or, implants and things like that, for like 900 and almost 1 million people. And then the other thing is that the USAID Family Planning Program, like in a typical year, they prevent over 8 million unintended pregnancies, over 5 million unsafe abortions, and 34,000 maternal deaths, because birth control is life-saving,
That's right.
life-saving medicine.
But of course, unsurprisingly, then in whatever press release or, I don't know, statement from the government about this, then what did they call this birth control?
Abortifacients?
Abortifacients.
They think that
abortifacients, of course.
Yeah, that's their justification, is that Trump's global gag rule is what it's called, which says that the U.S. can't fund any programs that are doing abortions, right?
Yep.
So so this is they're just like, well, we'll just call all of this abortion.
And the global gag rule, it's also known as the Mexico City policy, that goes in and out of effect with every Republican administration. So in other words, that's not different. Like that justification was true under all the Bushes, all of the everybody.
Yeah, but what's different is
we still,
did contraception.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. What they're doing is different from every Republican administration. And calling it abortifacients like gives them this excuse. But this is also just proof that these people think that birth control and IUDs are abortifacients. They think that.
Yeah.
They don't understand the science, nor do they care.
They don't care.
Yes.
They just don't
Yes.
want any people who can be pregnant to have any autonomy
That's right.
over their own bodies.
100%. I think with that article, it sounded like they hadn't started doing this yet. Like maybe there's a Hail Mary that like somehow the government will change course on this.
Yeah, there may be an update. I'm not sure. We'll put the link to
Yeah.
this article from NPR in the show notes. And if anybody has an update, please share it with us.
Last thing I'll say that's sort of unrelated, but it's about NPR. Of course, they defunded, all of public broadcasting, NPR, PBS, all of that stuff. Like totally, totally ridiculous. Like, under the theory that those organizations have like a anti-Trump, left-leaning view, which I think is has been demonstrably false. I will say that in the past few weeks since that's been happening, and this may not actually be demonstrably true, but it seems to me that on NPR, it is a little bit more anti-Trump and a little bit more left-leaning. I'm like, yeah, that's right. Yeah, fuck you guys. So you guys think we've been doing this the whole time, and now you're taking away money that you'd already allocated to us? Okay, it's on.
Yeah. And maybe that's because now they're being funded by left-wing radicals like me, who immediately, became a sustaining member of my local NPR station.
I'm for two, for WNYC and WWNO.
Yeah.
That's very good.
I donate to Radio Lab specifically because I love Radio Lab. It's the best because I believe in science and I think that people should know about science things.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we are going to now jump forward to our conversation about those other two cases.
Skrmetti. So this is the ban on gender affirming care in Tennessee for transgender youth. The issue in the case was what level of scrutiny that law should be given. So the issue is, what's the test? What test do we use to decide if this law is or is not constitutional? Any sort of law like this, there's sort of three options. A law can be subjected to rational basis scrutiny, intermediate scrutiny, or strict scrutiny. And what the law is doing determines what the test is, right? And you only get, so rational basis is anything goes, who cares, blah-de-blah-da. And that's for most laws. For most laws, that's anything the legislature does, it doesn't matter. We're going to be do they have anything they can say? Is there anything they can say as the reason that they passed this law? Okay, fine. It used to be that there was only strict scrutiny above that. So that's then for laws that are classifying or on the basis of race or national origin, mostly those things. So then those things, if that's what the law is about, then we're going to say, no, the state has to have a compelling interest and the law that they're passing has to be narrowly tailored to that interest.
Yeah, if they are trying to do something that restricts the rights of people based on these protected kind of classes. So
that's right.
Yeah.
And so the intermediate was eventually developed for sex-based classifications. That's the main one, and it's the one at issue here. So in other words, gender, if it's treating women and men differently. So they then created intermediate scrutiny for that classification. It's it's not as bad as race, but it's not just an economic whatever. So in that situation, then it's a lot more of an inquiry into what the government is doing. What is their reason and why are they doing it? So then it has to be an important government interest and it has to substantially further that interest. The truth is that with rational basis, then almost anything goes. Like I said, I mean, it's if the legislature said anything at all that that there was a reason, just a reason for it, even if it's a bad reason, even if it's an improvident reason, then that's fine because the democratic process should take care of that. With strict scrutiny, then it's almost never is the reason going to be good enough, and is the method going to be tailored enough. And intermediate scrutiny, it's a whole fucking mixed bag.
Wait, can I just throw in the reason that strict scrutiny protects race and religion and things like that? those kinds of rights is because they're in the
That's
Constitution.
right. It's
And we had to
enumerated.
develop
That's right.
a separate...
It's enumerated.
Yes,
that's
exactly.
Justice Thomas once always said,
Yes.
what's enumerated and what's not.
But the
Yeah.
reason that we had to come up with some other level of review or test for sex and gender is because we're like, sex and gender is not protected
That's
in
right.
the Constitution.
Right, because the ERA didn't
Yeah.
ever get. And in that situation, of course, this is with a very different courts, is because history and tradition showed that there had been plenty of discrimination on the basis of sex, on the basis of gender. So anyway, so that's the issue that was actually presented in that case. Whether that Tennessee law is classifying or is discriminating on the basis of sex, on the basis of gender. The argument against that, the argument for for the state for why it should only get rational basis review is that no, there are not boys on one side of the law and girls on the other side of the law. There are boys on both sides of the law and girls on both sides of the law. So, both boys and girls cannot get puberty blockers. Both boys and girls can get puberty blockers. In this situation they can't get them, in this situation they can. So that's not discriminating between the sexes.
So what the law says, just so people understand, so what the law says is that it's the reason that you're trying to get the puberty blockers.
So it's what it says is that they cannot be used, for to do anything that is against or different from your sex assigned at birth. But if it's for the purpose of precocious puberty or some sort of, which I do love that.
I know.
It's just really early. It's so precocious. I was a precocious child.
Yeah, yeah, I know.
Just that puberty is just dying to come out. Or
We should make
congenital
t-shirts
issues.
that say precocious.
That's right. Whatever. Yeah. If it's for other things that kids are experiencing during puberty, then you can use it for those things. The arguments on our side, on the plaintiff's side, is that by the law saying that the differential is based on your sex at birth, that's a sex-based classification.
Yeah.
On its face, that's a sex-based classification. One kid cannot use it to change their hormonal development that's different from their sex assigned at birth. But a kid who is doing it in a way that's consistent with their sex assigned at birth can do it. So what, of course, the Supreme Court says in the end is that, in a way that I never was expecting this opinion, they're very respectful. They call the person on this side, they call a transgender boy. It's a transgender boy who's wanting to use it for, for the transitioning, as opposed to just, regular boy, I guess, on this side who wants to use it for whatever. So it's boy, right? Mm-hmm. But the reality is also, and the way that the good legislature thought about it, and the way plaintiffs is no, on this side, it's a girl. That's what their sex assigned at birth is. They're not a transgender boy that the Supreme Court is so nice with using the correct pronoun. Mm-hmm. They're a girl, and it's a boy on this side that is allowed, and a girl that's not on the other side.
Can I read one of Kagan's quotes from oral arguments? So Kagan says, "You might have reasons for thinking that it's an appropriate regulation, and those reasons should be tested and respect given to them. But it's a dodge to say that this is not based on sex. It's based on medical purpose, when the medical purpose is utterly and entirely about sex."
So, all right, a couple points, and I'll try to be concise about this. There's ways to think about this as that it seems obviously not about sex. There's ways to think about it that it seems obviously about sex. But clearly that is at play here, right? What a person's sex is, or what a person wants their sex to be, because also there's a lot of the parts of the law that talks about, that the purpose is to minimize disdain of the sex that you were born with, and to not encourage people to have a new one or whatever shit, which like also like is like very much rooted in the history and tradition of like the Supreme Court jurisprudence on sex-based discrimination about gender-based stereotypes. So there's like there's a lot of evidence for like why this just totally makes sense that it should be given heightened scrutiny, intermediate scrutiny, because it's a sex-based classification. That's not what the Supreme Court decides. They decide, of course, that it is not. This is not a sex-based classification because this law just classifies on the basis of age and of medical purpose. And there was, of course, a lot of discussion at oral argument that is not addressed at all in the majority opinion, that like laws often do a lot of different things, right? Like that, like you can be classifying on this basis, that basis, a bunch of different shit. But like if one of them is a protected classification, then like that counts. Like that gets you into the realm of heightened scrutiny. So like it doesn't matter that like, sure, this is also the legislature's reasoning for this is also age and the purpose.
Yeah, but they're very clear. Tennessee, the law says that they are passing this law because they have an interest, a legislative interest. Their purpose is to encourage minors to appreciate their sex, and they want to bar medical care for certain people that might encourage minors to become disdainful of their sex. This is quote, disdainful of their sex.
And that would encourage the other ones about encouraging people to change their sex or something equally is just like, you know, offensive and
But the whole purpose is like they have an expectation of what your sex, what you should be in terms of the sex.
That's not what the Supreme Court found.
Well,
Michelle.
okay.
That was my first. Second point, I think, goes to what Kagan is saying. And that was incredibly frustrating in oral argument. So much of the thrust of the argument was about what are the state's reasons? What are the state's reasons? And like, how could a law like this ever survive under this kind of scrutiny, that kind of scrutiny? Like, it's 100% cart before the horse. Like you shouldn't be thinking about that at all. Like, the point of this is, what's the fucking test? Not like, does the law pass the test? Or does the state have good arguments that maybe the law passes the test? That's a different thing. That's like not related to this. Everything they're doing, or many things they're doing, is outcome determined.
They know what the ends are.
They're real worried about whether these laws will all stand. It was so, because this is like, it's controversial, it's new, it's stuff that makes people uncomfortable. Like, just the whole thing was infused with all of that, like the policy considerations, but what will we do if these laws don't survive? Like, what will, whatever, like that. I've never seen where like it's so obviously conflated in public. Like, everybody probably, I assume that that's what they're talking about, but that's what the six of them are talking about separately when they're deciding to give it like lowest test ever or highest test ever, But like, this was just like, just openly talking about like, well, how is this going to work? Like, that's not the issue. The issue is, what is the law doing? Is it classifying on the basis of a protected status, a protected class? If so, we move on to step 2, which is, what's the state's reasons? Are they good enough? Blah, blah, blah.
Are they doing
whatever
this,
their
like, the
reasons
least
are has
restrictive?
nothing
Yeah.
to do with what the test is. Some of the state's reasoning is about things that could be considered as sex-based stereotypes. The majority opinion, of course, says that that's not what's happening. What's happening with those reasonings is that, like, there are very good reasons why the legislature is concerned about these treatments, and so that's why they're worried about these things and saying that this is part of the purpose of the law. Like, if anything, that evidence should be going to the test. That, like, we're in a gendered realm, right? Not like, do they have a reason? So anyway, so the Supreme Court also, of course, like they jump ahead and they actually say that this law does not violate the Equal Protection Clause.
That's right.
Like, which they didn't have to do. The question was, what's the goddamn test? Send it back to the other courts to decide, does it meet it? Granted, with what they decided, which is that it's rational basis, that's a foregone conclusion that it will meet it. So, I mean, I guess why bother? Why bother the lower courts with figuring that shit out? But like,
as long as the government has any plausible reason.
It can be anything, honestly. So, but the third part to me that was just like unbelievably confounding, and like particularly Justice Kavanaugh kept coming back to this. So, oh my God, but what's it going to look like then when like courts are having to decide this? What's the test going to look like? All right, like there's like scientific evidence on both sides, and it's just like it's evolving and it's confusing, and like how are we gonna ever weigh that? How are federal courts gonna ever weigh that? Like, bitch, please. Like, I mean, that is literally the province of the courts. Judges constantly are deciding cases, not just on ones that are medical or medically based, but on all kinds of areas that they have no fucking idea about. Like, complicated engineering cases, complicated financial cases, complicated every kinds of cases that like the federal judges have no experience in, they have no knowledge of. The whole point of expert witnesses, one of the criteria for being an expert witness is that you have specialized knowledge and that it will be helpful to the court. That's why we have them. So like that was my one frustration with Prelogger, who I love, and the lawyer for the plaintiff. And I thought both of them did great, really great, which in what had to have been an unbelievably exhausting oral argument. I assumed by the end they just were like, I want to like just die. Like, must have been so exhausting.
I just want to say, like, for listeners, like, so this case was argued early in the term, and so it was still Biden was still president,
yeah,
and so
the
Elizabeth
Solicitor
Prelogger,
General, Biden's Solicitor General.
Biden's solicitor. So the government was coming in on the side of the parents in this.
Yeah. So anyway, I would have leaned in more to like that. This is 100% what courts do. There are competing expert opinions all the time in court cases. There are court cases where like the federal courts, those individual judges have absolutely no professional expertise in that area, and we never question whether they're going to be able to like validly weigh that, go through the evidence, and make a decision. So I would have leaned into that more. Not that it would have mattered, but like I think that really it was just an insane argument. Also, like all of a sudden you guys have some humility. I mean, how would we make those kinds of decisions? Like they believe that they should be like the deciders of every goddamn thing. Like you guys know you could weigh through that evidence. And then, of course, like the corollary being that's a province of the legislature, policy decisions. This is conflicted science that's evolving. That's really best for the legislature to be deciding, which I understand is like the general concept of federalism and separation of powers. But this is, again, like a bitch, please, like with the same with like courts like looking at the legislative intent all the time. Like, why don't you guys come down to a state legislature, see what's going on around there? But why don't you see how much vetting is happening? Why don't you see how many experts are testifying? How much notice they give people like us on the opposition to get their experts there? Yeah, like that's not happening.
Also,
that's not happening.
Literally, I mean, in the last 10 years that I've been sitting at the legislature, literally watching them debate all kinds of manner of like, hey, we're legislating healthcare in this particular area because we hate everyone.
Yes.
We hate women. We hate trans people. They never actually put any experts on to make the case for them. It's all just like ideological warriors. Like our side has doctors, we have pediatricians, we have social workers, psychologists, like they have no one on their side to ever come.
And our side loses because again, like there's it's not like a court. They're not that they're going with what their political motivation is.
Right. They have the ends and they're gonna find the means.
But I mean with the legislature, I mean they're their motivation is political. I mean, the point of why we supposedly leave it to them is that there's a democratic way to solve that, which gerrymandering is basically not true, but whatever. But with this Kavanaugh bullshit, I mean, it's just, I was also just so frustrated with like listening to him in particular, talk about like how like, there's just, this is a hard question. It harms some people, it helps some other people, and there's evidence on this side and there's evidence on that side. And that is a policy issue, and that shouldn't determine the test. But do you think that like the best outcome then is to give it the least test?
Right. If it's difficult,
exactly.
Then give it more scrutiny.
Yes, correct. Again, I mean, like this is really, really hard. So we're gonna say, but we're gonna let the states do whatever they want.
So Roberts wrote the opinion, and of course Clarence with his fucking Clarence or whatever. Let's talk about Barrett's.
Yeah, that's the only the real thing to add with this is that. So anyway, so the court said, nope, we're not finding that this is subject to heightened scrutiny on a basis that like, is not really in keeping with other precedent. There's no real world in which this classification has nothing to do with with sex and gender. Like that's just not
they saw
possible.
This case and they were like, we want to find a way to uphold this ban.
That's right.
And so we're just going to make shit up.
That's right. And we're going to like kind of say the whole time that we're going to wring our hands the whole time about this. Like, we
don't know. So when in doubt, let's just assume Tennessee's doing the right thing.
Or when in doubt, let's just give it the easiest test. Let's just go with the easiest test, which, the other argument was, the law doesn't already recognize a classification that is on the basis of transgender status, transgender identity, but the law should recognize this because it meets the characteristics of other classes that the law recognizes. The majority punted on that, which is actually good, but Barrett decided that she was going to like pull a Thomas and just let everybody know that if that were the issue, she does not agree. She would vote that it is not a protected class, and her reasoning is of course like offensive in all sorts of different ways. It came up some an oral argument about like whether the characteristic is really immutable and whether it's a group that is cohesive, basically, that has similar characteristics.
So she's worried about
I'm sure she's worried.
Potential complications from recognizing transgender people as a suspected class, because that would require would require courts to oversee all manner of policy choices that the legislature would normally make. And that this would also implicate several other areas of legitimate regulatory policy, ranging from access to restrooms to eligibility for boys and girls sports teams.
Yeah, so this came up a bunch at oral argument, and like I thought that was all very interesting because like the conservatives on the court were basically like, if either way, if we find that this is a classification on the basis of sex, or we agree that transgender identity is a protected class, is a protected status, then doesn't that mean
down all of these fucking bullshit, mean-spirited laws?
But again, that's the government's interest is going to be different in those scenarios. That's the whole point. Like, it's a test. The facts are always different. That's why it's a test. And then you put in what the facts are, and then there's an outcome. So like, no, it wouldn't necessarily be the same.
Yeah.
With a gender affirming care ban versus a sports ban. Obviously, I don't agree with any of those laws, but that's right, and that's legally correct, and also a very smart argument that like there will be different interests, there will be different evidence.
But Barrett's very concerned about that. She does not want the court to be in the business of looking to closely.
You know what the
at
court also didn't want to be
those
in the
laws.
business of is looking at laws that were doing those kind of things to deny the rights
people?
of black people. Yeah,
Yeah.
for a real long time.
Yeah,
That-
exactly.
That also would have gotten the court into a lot of deciding about the policy determinations of the states, which they did eventually after
Yeah.
the 1964 Civil Rights Act. But yeah. Some things are just wrong if the state does them.
That's right.
Yeah, the federal courts need to look into it. Maybe they've got a good reason, maybe they don't.
Justice Sonia Sotomayor dissented. She was joined by Jackson and Kagan. Her dissent says this law plainly classifies on the basis of sex. It should be reviewed using intermediate scrutiny. We can look at this and see whether or not there is like some legitimate reason, but like,
Yes.
you know, we need to have like the right level of review here.
Yes. Again, that's the issue that was presented.
Yeah. And I think that it's also important that her dissent points out that the federal government has started expelling transgender service members from the military and is threatening to withdraw funding from schools and nonprofits that espouse support for transgender individuals. Like, there is obviously like a concerted effort, like an organized effort by governments, including the federal government now, to go after transgender people. So this whole Barrett argument about they're not a suspected.
No, I know.
And
And
also,
she did a whole.
She also
I know.
did the whole
I know.
history fucking
I
and
know.
tradition
I
thing.
know.
Well,
I know.
You know, there's nobody was writing about like transgender people being discriminated against in fucking 1802. So obviously, it's fine. It's fine. Nobody's worried about them. Like, we don't need to be worried. I mean,
Well, and I mean, the plaintiff's lawyer did point out. I mean, her point was like private discrimination doesn't matter, or was there like legal discrimination? And the plaintiffs, the lawyer for the plaintiffs was like, yeah, I mean, cross-dressing, bans on cross-dressing and military service. Like, there's evidence in the laws. And also, she made the point that lots of laws that are anti-gay have crossover, basically, on this issue. Anyway, it's it's insane.
Okay.
It's insane.
closing thought here. I just want to say this for the record, for the permanent record. The Supreme Court,
It's horrible.
so in the same term, they have held that there is a constitutional right for parents to prevent their children from seeing books that happen to feature LGBTQ plus people and issues, characters. And also, they have refused to rule that parents have a constitutional right to provide their children
So that was
with
not
gender-affirming care.
That was actually not an issue.
I know it wasn't, but that is the goal.
Well, it's not the goal; it's the outcome, right? Barrett made
Right.
clear several times, like there's still a parental rights argument, they'll strike that down too,
Right.
But to me, then the
Parents
the
have
better
a right
parallel-
to raise their children according to the Supreme Court's idea of how they should raise their children. But if they want to raise their children to think differently, if they want to raise them respecting their gender identity, then maybe they don't have that right.
To me, the better parallel is that, yes, in one context, then the Supreme Court is saying that, parents have this expansive right, people have this expansive right, and we as the court will aggressively interrogate what the state is doing to, possibly infringe on that right. And then in these other ways, we're saying that you don't have a right at all. Right, you don't have a right to enforce your Medicaid rights, and your rights are not protected if you're transgender. And what limited rights you do have in that context, then we're actively saying that the state can basically do whatever it wants.
Yeah.
So the favoring of who has rights and in what context is significant.
Yeah.
And they're all in
And
different
let's
legal
be clear,
terms, but
who is favored, who
Yes.
has the rights. It is white
Religious people.
religious Christians, not
Religious
just
people.
religious people. I mean, they threw, the case is called Mahmoud because they wanted to pretend that they actually care about the religious
Was there like
perspectives.
one Muslim person
Exactly.
in the case?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. 100%. Okay.
Okay, so the last awesome case.
Trump v. CASA. Okay.
So which one is this?
So this is the birthright citizenship case, but it's not actually about birthright citizenship
Right.
necessarily, although some of those issues get brought up and we'll talk about them.
Right, the issue that was presented to the court was, are universal, quote unquote, universal injunctions constitutional?
That's right.
I crammed for this test, and you brought your notes.
I did. I brought notes. Okay. So President Trump on day one issued an executive order ending birthright citizenship, sort of. Okay. So
No,
this
that's
is
what it said.
yeah. So this is protecting the meaning and value of American citizenship. So the order says that for a child born in the U.S. to be considered a citizen at birth, at least one parent must be either a U.S. citizen or a lawful permanent resident. So like a green card holder, right?
Which
So
on its face, well, that goes against the Constitution on its face, the 14th Amendment on its face, and all of Supreme Court jurisprudence on this.
that's right. So citizenship under this order is not applied to children born to parents who are unlawfully present in the United States or children born to parents who are in the U.S. legally but on like a temporary basis. So like temporary protected status, student visas, tourist visas, work visas, etc.
Or just whatever, just if like that, the point being that being born on U.S. soil would no longer convey citizenship.
But that, you're right, it completely conflicts with the 14th Amendment, which says all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside.
It also conflicts with the entire theory of citizenship that the United States has. I mean, because of this, but like the United States historically, since the 14th Amendment, has had a different theory of citizenship than most other countries, honestly. Like,
If you're born here,
that's
you're a
right.
citizen.
So we recognize an expansive view of citizenship and also one specifically that is not tied to blood, which is like a distinctive feature of our country that makes it the melting pot. And supposedly until, not until recently, there's been lots of times that immigrants weren't particularly welcomed, but like in general, it's supposed to be, as the Statue of Liberty says, a welcoming place for immigrants. So like this really is like, talk about policy decisions that don't get decided by the executive administration by executive order, at least they're not supposed to. This goes to the core of like who we are. And like what we consider ourselves to be as Americans.
But that fundamental question about birthright citizenship is not what actually came to the court. The case really centered on the idea of nationwide injunctions. So whether to allow the administration to enforce the order in some parts of the country, but then not others. Like, can one court in one part of the country say this is so facially unconstitutional, it's such a violation of the 14th Amendment that like, no, you can't enforce this executive order anywhere in the country.
People have bitched and bitched and bitched about that on both sides because like, at times then there's been some kind of crazy things that have happened. Like
Kaczmarek.
Yes, exactly. Kaczmarek is our example. Like when he issued a nationwide injunction on mifepristone, on the FDA regulations of mifepristone. It's not that like this stuff there isn't a reason to be sort of like annoyed about it at times.
Right.
But like it's annoying on both sides and it's also necessary on both sides. And there's a remedy. Like Kaczmarek's order was overturned.
Yeah.
If it's not valid, then there's an appeal process to get rid of it.
Yeah.
But like the alternative, if you don't have this ability to for a judge to say like, okay, I've looked at this. This is applicable to everybody in this country, and this is fucking bullshit. And like, I'm just gonna like go ahead and put the injunction in. Is that you would have to do that on a piecemeal basis all over the place.
The case was argued by U.S. Solicitor General John Sauer. His voice is insanely grating. I don't know what it is with Trump and like surrounding himself with people that have like serious like throat issues. I don't know. Beyond the arguments that this motherfucker is making, like I don't know how I am going to survive the next like 3 years of Supreme Court oral arguments listening to this guy's voice.
And you're such a Elizabeth Prelog. Is Elizabeth her first name?
Elizabeth, yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
Love her.
Yeah. Big hetero crush on Elizabeth Prelogger. His opening is basically his 2 points are Trump's executive order reflects the original meaning of the 14th Amendment, which was only intended to apply to the children of
slaves.
formerly enslaved persons. Okay. And that nationwide injunctions prevent novel legal questions from percolating in the lower courts. And they allow plaintiffs to shop for favorable forum. I mean, I think both sides have done this.
That's a both sides issue. Yeah.
So courts are acting too quickly. They create this sort of ongoing risk of conflicting judgments. So that was his argument.
Right, which is the Supreme Court's job then, to weigh in when there's conflicting shit. So whatever. Yeah, carry on.
One of the things that came up in oral arguments was if we're not doing nationwide injunctions, like, then are class actions really kind of the way to go? Is this more appropriate? And in some circumstances, that makes sense. The liberal justices had problems with that. I mean, they didn't think that would make sense for this case because this is like so obviously unconstitutional. Like they want to preserve these kind of universal or nationwide injunctions for cases that are so obviously in conflict with the plain letter of the law.
Right. Because anything else is sort of like, it's not judicially efficient. You know,
right?
Because
you have to get a class certified. You have to find all all of these different plaintiffs to like join as a class. They have to be similar, like very similarly situated. There's all this like rigorous certification process that happens. So one of the things that Kagan pointed out was like would the challengers even be able to have a class certified so that they could get collective relief, and then would that relief then apply to people that weren't like already named in a class? The way that I think about it is like almost all of us have gotten something in the mail.
Right.
That says like Bank of America like fucked up and like screwed over a bunch of people that had credit cards. You weren't necessarily a party in that lawsuit, but it was brought as a class action, and so you are going to benefit from the decision in that lawsuit. And like now, whatever Bank of America did that is being remedied by that decision applies to you too. Is that right?
That's right. So yeah, I mean, so one of the things that's frustrating about this is similar to the Justice Thomas with the 1983 stuff. Is that like, you know, while he's claiming that it's super expansive, in reality, the court has gutted 1983 already in millions of ways. So same thing with class actions. Like the Supreme Court has limited the ability for attorneys to bring class actions in all kinds of ways. So like the notion that like, oh, like, don't worry, there's not going to be like we're getting rid of universal injunctions, but like we've got the answer. You guys can just bring class actions. Like has like some disingenuousness to it, like on its face. Sure. But like you guys have already made that like increasingly more difficult. Also, there's circumstances where what is required is an opt-in.
Yeah.
class action, which is like
which I think is
horribly
what they would,
onerous, which is extremely onerous.
Yeah, which is I think what Sauer would prefer because
I'm sure. Well, of course, because it's extremely onerous. Because like again, then random people are supposed to be like looking at their mail and then actually doing this.
Yeah.
One of the problems here is that I don't think that certifying a class would be that hard.
Probably.
Whether it was nationwide or and they've
they're
done
doing it.
That's
yeah.
right. Yeah. Because people are going to be similarly situated. But like there's going to be plenty of other situations where a universal injunction would have otherwise changed. So let's think about this. So like the Muslim ban, right? Remember that?
Yeah.
Trump won. I don't know that would be as easy, right? Like people are coming from all different countries. Everybody in that class is going to be different. Are you already here? And you're going to have to be sent back? Are you on your way here? Are you waiting for a visa? What country are you from?
Right. It's similar here in that, like, okay, so then is it all people who are here with temporary protected status go into a class, depending on, again, where you're filing and whatever.
Yeah, I mean, the only reason with this is that the legal issue is pretty clear. And so I don't know that it really... most of those distinctions should matter very much, but that's not true in most cases, right? What's the government's reason?
Yeah.
You know? And is it tailored to that reason? Like that, all of that actually does matter, if not on an individual basis, at least on a class-wide basis. You have lots of class actions then that have like, you know, subclasses and all that shit. Like class action litigation is very complicated. It's expensive. It's difficult. It's not like the simple way that they talked about this, like just like, nah, you can't do this, but like that's not a big deal, man. It's not a big deal. There's other remedies. Like, okay, well, you guys have already like actively tried to limit those remedies, like actively, and make them more difficult for plaintiffs to pursue. And there's no guarantee that even in this context, you're going to say that this one works.
But also Sauer just straight up says, like, Kagan is like, people go for class certification. Would you be okay with that? And he's like, we'd probably like actually object to the class certification too.
100%. Certifying a nationwide class is very, very hard.
Ridiculous.
Very hard.
That's
like,
ridiculous.
In general. Right now, what they've left people to is that you might have to literally as each person litigate this. So like me personally, I have to litigate whether you can deny my child birthright citizenship.
What if we're just doing like injunctions in like a certain circuit, right? And so this comes up. So Kagan asked about this, and then Barrett even followed up on this. And so Barrett was like asking, you know, whether the Trump administration would follow a ruling by, you know, a certain circuit's court of appeals, right?
Like where you would respect the opinions and the judgments of the Supreme Court, and you're saying you would respect the judgment, but not necessarily the opinion of a lower court.
And again, I think in the vast majority of instances, our practice has been to respect the opinion as well, in the circuits as well. But my understanding is that has not been a categorical practice in the way respect for the precedents and the judgments of the Supreme Court has been.
Then Sauer is like, the Department of Justice would generally, but not always, follow the Court of Appeals decision.
I remember
it
this.
was insane.
Yeah. And she did.
And Barrett was like,
press him on
you
this.
keep saying generally, like you keep like, what does that mean?
They're either kind of not, or they don't want to follow these orders because they just like don't think they're legitimate. Right. Which again is not. That's not a basis to not follow a court order.
That's not the rule of law.
People get arrested all the time for that.
Yeah.
This was one of my seriously early in season 1. They were pretty openly saying, including Caroline Leavitt, that like they would follow, of course, the Trump administration, of course, President Trump is gonna follow court orders from the Supreme Court.
Yes.
They like are very like they will not say that they're going to follow lower court orders, which is like, again, batshit crazy.
Yeah. Kagan jumps in and she's like, so essentially what you're saying is you would follow the Supreme Court. So once a case then gets to us after like 4 years, you're going to respect that. In the interim, for 4 years, they're going to be, and this is Kagan quoting, according to all the law that this court has ever made, ought to be citizens who are not being treated as such. So for 4 years, we've got, a whole bunch of people in random parts of the country that are just not being considered citizens because that EO applies to this circuit, but not this other circuit.
Which that's the specific facts of this case. Obviously, it could be all because this was really a case about the process. So it could
crazy.
It could be on any issue, right?
Yeah.
And the two things that are sort of important, I think, for people to understand on that is that number one, almost no cases make it to the Supreme Court. In general, lawyers, just understand. That the federal circuits and really same in the states, those are the courts of last resort in almost all instances. It's the only time you have a right of appeal. After that, then the Supreme Court of either the state or the federal one, they have to agree to take the case. And they take basically no cases and fewer and fewer all the time. So it's not it's very common, in other words, that a case does not go to the Supreme Court.
Well, that's why
period.
The outcome in this case is so dangerous.
I know, and again, think about this: is the ruling they have made is with everything.
Yeah,
it's not with these facts; it's with all of them.
Yeah.
So the Trump administration also saying that they're only gonna follow it. Then most of the time that's never gonna happen.
Yeah.
And then here, then of course, also Kagan and I think so. Yeah, consistently brought up also why would you guys? Why would this case, why would a case that's so obviously unconstitutional that the government is losing ever get to the Supreme Court? Because you've lost the whole time.
I'm just going to ask you to put yourself in a different frame of mind. Hard to do. Assume something you won't want to assume. But the assumption that I want you to make is that on the merits, which of course you did not take to this court, on the merits you are wrong, that the EO is unlawful. And I want to ask you, if we assume that, how do we get to that result on your view of the rules?
It is very difficult for me to attempt the hypothetical, but I will.
I think that that's the important question in this case. Let's just assume you're dead wrong. How do we get to that result? Does every single person that is affected by this EO have to bring their own suit? Are there alternatives? How long does it take? How do we get to the result that there is a single rule of citizenship that is the rule that we've historically applied rather than the rule that the EO would have us do?
Rule 23 would be one natural path, assuming that a class could be certified, which we might dispute in this particular case.
So in other words, if you lose at the circuit court, you have to be the person that asks the Supreme Court to review it.
Yes.
The winner doesn't ask the Supreme Court to review it. They won. So the loser asks. So if the federal government's the loser at the 5th Circuit, 8th Circuit, whatever fucking circuit, then but you're only gonna listen if the Supreme Court says it. Why would you ever ask them?
Yeah.
So it's both that completely unequal and differential application of the law, right? Depending on where you live and or if you have access to a lawyer, depending on if classes do get certified, right? So all of that, just differential shit everywhere. And then back to the point of that, if the only thing that they recognize is once the Supreme Court weighs in, there may never be that.
Yeah.
That may never happen. Because you as the government would have to be the ones that ask them to do that. Why would you do that if your plan is to just ignore the lower courts?
Right. So the practical implication of this was really well articulated by the state's lawyers. There were several states that joined together and also brought this and said, this is ridiculous for us for several reasons. In New Jersey, everybody who is living in New Jersey gets access to Medicaid, SNAP benefits, WIC, federal programs, but those federal programs require proof of citizenship.
Yeah.
Okay? So we're perfectly happy to do that in the state of New Jersey, but we have hundreds of thousands of people moving into the state of New Jersey every year from states all around the country. So if in the Fifth Circuit, people are not U.S. citizens when they're born, then people moving from Texas, Louisiana to New Jersey, now New Jersey has the administrative burden of having to figure
that
out
out.
whether or not
Yeah.
they're citizens. Like they have to
Yes.
apply for social security numbers for them, like basically get them U.S. citizenship because they're now living in New Jersey. I mean,
Or figure out that they don't have that, like when,
Right.
when you've already admitted somebody in the hospital, and now, I mean, you have to treat people anyway, but
you're pregnant, you're
Right.
visiting your family
Right.
in one state, you go into labor and your baby is born in that state. One, the hospitals now have a burden because
Yes.
they have to get
Figure out
some
your
size. Yeah, they have to
citizenship.
figure out
Yes.
your
Yes.
citizenship status.
Yes.
But if you're like traveling in the country, you may not have gone home
No.
for Christmas with your fucking passport.
no, that's right. That's going to be it's going to be a pending issue then. Your kid's citizenship you're having to follow up with a hospital in some other state, for an indeterminate amount of time.
And now we're
Which also your
now we
kid
have
might
to-
need medical care in that indeterminate amount of time. Too,
Yeah, and
you know?
are they eligible for medical care because they're may or may not be citizens? Now, in addition to our overnight bag that we're taking to the hospital to have the baby, we have to have our fucking birth certificate and
Right.
passport, which a lot of people don't have.
Yep.
I mean, it's fucking crazy.
It's 100% crazy. And again, because of the interstate issues, then it's even more obvious than in other cases why a nationwide injunction would be not only helpful but maybe necessary. And the flip side, of course, being that as we were saying before, when that happens improperly or overly broadly, there's a remedy for that. If it's really bad shit, if a judge is just gone off the fucking reservation, that will get reversed very quickly.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking about the implications in this particular case, but
Yeah.
what this decision says is that basically, they have completely narrowed the ability for any lower court judges to issue nationwide injunctions.
Yeah.
And so that is just giving unchecked executive power. The executive can just kind of do whatever the fuck they want.
Yeah, or I mean, maybe not, but who knows what the
Who gonna check me, boo?
Who knows how you solve that? Again with the Supreme Court, they're well, that's not what we're saying. There's ways that this could be dealt with, but you guys figure that out. And then of course whenever people try to figure it out, they're gonna knock down a bunch of those.
Yeah.
And and I assume now that Trump also, be well, they don't know if those are legitimate. And if that was their theory for not following the nationwide injunctions, why would they be following the class action ones? They're not sure if that's going to hold. It might not. They're right.
not.
It might not.
Yeah. Barrett wrote this decision 6-3. I just want to circle back to what you said in season 1. You're like, Barrett's kind of my favorite justice.
I did not say that.
sense.
I did not say that I did not.
You didn't say favorite.
That.
That's right.
I said,
I'll be fair.
please do not misquote me on that. I said I kind of don't hate her.
Okay.
And have some respect for her, I think I probably said.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's just dispose of that.
This was her first big controversial opinion that she was the author of. So
And
we'll
basically,
see what happens.
they said, we hate nationwide injunctions and we want to say that lower courts can't do them. We want to basically strip the lower courts of all of their
in addition to all the other people and entities that the Supreme Court has antipathy for, all of the lower courts in their own federal system are very high on their list.
Yeah. We have the outcome that we want, which is we
Yes.
want to get rid of these nationwide injunctions. And so then Barrett has to figure out how to do that with this case, which is like the most absurd case.
Right.
So she says that courts would have the power to issue universal injunctions only if courts had provided similar remedies in early English and U.S. territories. So again, we're going back to the history and tradition. Like, what are we doing here?
Right.
Like,
That's
what what are we doing here?
Yeah.
I was kind of losing my mind reading this opinion. All right, so Justice Sonia Sotomayor writes a dissent. Justice Jackson does too, but Sotomayor read hers from the bench, which is a rare thing.
Yeah.
And she states what's very obvious is that every single court who has reviewed this executive order has deemed it, quote, patently unconstitutional.
Right.
But the practical effect of this majority ruling is that, quote, newborns subject to the citizenship order will face the gravest harms imaginable. Affected children also risk losing the chance to participate in American society altogether unless their parents have sufficient resources to file individual suits or successfully challenge the citizenship order in removal proceedings. Because if babies are being born and they're not citizens, then they're subject to removal.
Well, because then they're going to get the parents out, obviously, too. And parents are going to, that's...
But they may be
they're already
separated. They
doing
don't
that.
care.
Yeah.
So Justice Jackson also wrote a separate dissent, which was, I mean, she joined Sotomayor's, but she really wanted to put, like, a stake in the ground. And she called this ruling an existential threat to the rule of law. So her warning basically is that, like, if we're allowing the executive branch to act unlawfully against people who cannot bring lawsuits, then we're just completely undermining the foundation of our legal system.
Which
that
again,
laws like only apply to those who have basically the
access
privilege
to the courts.
to access the courts.
Yes. With this issue specifically, with birthright citizenship, at least, thus far, then, I mean, they still, literally had it. Obviously, they knew this was a possibility. They had that class action in their pocket.
They were ready, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, so within 24 hours, they filed that. So, like, right now, things are kind of okay because, like, the classes have been certified and we'll see if that sticks. But, like, I'm very concerned about how this plays out with, like, all kinds of other issues going forward.
Yeah.
You're taking a rarely used but very effective remedy for checking federal power away from litigants and telling them to just, like, kind of figure it out.
Justice Clarence Thomas, who by his own legal reasoning should not even be on the court, also, again, wrote a concurring opinion. And his is making this point. I mean, he's basically saying only in rare cases, like stopping a public nuisance, which I would argue he is a public nuisance. Oh, my God. It was just, all right. So, all right. The moral of this story is that they're castrating district courts. They don't,
and telling the federal, and also not really telling the Trump administration that they have to listen to them either.
Yeah,
I mean, they're like, we don't really.
They're
care
castrating
about
them.
that.
They're
That's
like,
right.
You don't have the power to do the illegal analysis.
Yeah.
You don't have any decision making power. No one needs to fucking listen to you. But
It's
the
just
thing is,
horrible.
like, this is gonna wrap up like all the batshit crazy Trump appointed judges that they do. Like, I mean, this is going to apply to Kaczmarek and fucking Eileen Cannon. And
I think that they will be sorry about this. I think that Republican administrations, I think Republicans when Democratic administrations are in place will be very sorry about this.
Maybe they're just anticipating that we're never going to have Democrats in power again.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's true, but I guess we'll see.
I don't know. I mean, they're just like, they're building a body of law that just concentrates power in the Supreme Court and the executive.
Yeah.
And then they can just do whatever the fuck they want, depending on whatever case is in front of him, or depending on the judge, or depending on who the president is.
The things that the right has been like pressing and advocating for, they're getting, but like, I mean, the expansive view of that, the Supreme Court is like, you know, constantly signaling about, like, you might also lose things that you care about.
But then the other thing, though, Ellie, is that, like, if they make an oopsie, they can just overturn their previous ruling because
Yeah.
stare decisis,
I mean, that's
decisis.
right. I certainly agree that their old stare decisis theories are not really, they don't give two shits about that. But I don't think that the Supreme Court is going to get into the business of just like flip-flopping all the time on things. I don't. I mean, I agree. I mean, it's not your face. I mean, it's not, it's certainly not, that's not, I mean, they're very outcome driven at this point. But like, I mean, I don't think that's going to happen.
Okay.
But I mean, you know.
We're going to end the podcast with a quote from Justice Jackson's dissent in this case, because it's...
I love her. She's constantly writing dissenting opinions, like way more. It's like something like she's written double the amount of dissenting opinions than like Roberts like ever has, like already at this point. And I fucking love it. Like, I mean, she is sounding the alarm. She's saying over and over again that what they're doing is an existential threat to democracy. They don't really like that, unsurprisingly. Again, then stop doing things that are an existential threat to democracy. That would be another way of solving this problem. But yeah, no, I love it.
I actually think that this endorsement is going to hold up rather than your Barrett endorsement.
Well,
from
they're for
season 1.
different. I mean, listen, I try to be fair. They're for different. I mean,
I was giving you a hard time.
Anyway,
All right,
moving
Justice
on.
Jackson says that the majority's, quote, complicity in the creation of a culture of disdain for lower courts, their rulings, and the law as they interpret it, will surely hasten the downfall of our governing institutions, enabling our collective demise.
I like her flair for the drama.
Damn.
That's it. They don't like that either. That's nothing they don't like.
I think that's a hair flip.
That's right. Mic drop.
Yeah. We will be back next week, and we're going to have an interesting conversation with two of our colleagues about a case that is ongoing here in Louisiana, challenging a law that adds mifepristone and misoprostol, the two medications commonly used for medication abortions, also miscarriage, also gastric ulcers, all kinds of stuff.
Postpartum hemorrhage.
Postpartum hemorrhage, to the list of dangerous controlled substances.
Yep.
Because, you know, mifepristone is...
Louisiana, the first and only state.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So there's a lawsuit in Louisiana. Lift Louisiana is part of that, and our colleagues at the Lawyering Project.
Yep.
And so we're going to have two of the lawyers that are working on that case join us next week, so that should be interesting.
And I work on that case, and I'll be joining us.
Yeah, it's true.
In the meantime, yes, as Michelle said, we're now on YouTube.
Yeah, watch us on YouTube.
What's it called? Just Lift Louisiana, I guess. Search that on
If you,
YouTube.
yeah, if you go to Lift Louisiana's YouTube page, you can look at podcasts, and all of the Seriously episodes are there, and then also some of the shorts. So if you want to, like, you know, share some of our best moments where we're just saying ridiculous or offensive shit with people.
Never ridiculous.
Sometimes
Totally
it's ridiculous.
offensive. That can be our tagline.
Yes, never ridiculous, always
Totally
offensive. Yes.
Yeah, and otherwise, then, yeah, what are people supposed to do, Michelle?
They should rate, review, obviously subscribe. And again, please send us what you want to hear about, but also just like
Yeah.
What your seriously moment
the voice
is.
memos. Yeah, we need to get back to doing the voice memos on, send us your serious.
send us a voice memo. You can do that through Instagram, or you can send us an email, and those links are in the show notes. So see you next week.
Thanks, everybody.
Seriously is presented by Lift Louisiana, a nonprofit organization advocating for reproductive health rights and justice.